Scene 1. Gethsemane. The moonlight cast an ethereal glow upon the gnarled olive trees of Gethsemane. A cool breeze rustled through the leaves, whispering secrets in the night. Jesus, his heart heavy with unspoken dread, led his disciples Peter, James, and John deeper into the garden. "Sit here," he instructed them, his voice barely a murmur. "I am exceeding sorrowful, even unto death. Tarry ye here, and watch with me." Walking a stone's throw away, Jesus knelt and fell on his face, the weight of the world pressing down on him. He knew the hour of his betrayal was upon him, and the thought of the suffering that awaited him filled him with an agonizing anxiety. "Abba, Father," he began, his voice raw with emotion. "All things are possible unto thee. Take away this cup from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what thou wilt." A tense silence followed. The only sounds were the chirping crickets and the distant howl of a stray dog. Time seemed to stretch, each second heavy with anticipation. Then, Jesus rose and returned to his disciples. He found them fast asleep, their heads slumped against their chests. A wave of disappointment washed over him. "Could ye not watch with me 1 hour?" he asked gently, a hint of sadness in his eyes. Returning to his prayer spot, Jesus poured out his soul once more. "O my Father, if this cup may not pass away from me, except I drink it, thy will be done." Sweat beaded on his brow, each drop glistening like a pearl in the moonlight. The weight of his sacrifice for humanity, the burden of their sins, threatened to crush him. Yet, through the pain, a resolute determination shone in his eyes. Suddenly, an angel, his form shimmering with celestial light, descended from the heavens and stood beside Jesus. He didn't speak, but his presence brought a wave of comfort and renewed strength. Fortified, Jesus returned to his disciples a third time. This time, their eyes fluttered open, guilt washing across their faces as they met his gaze. But it was too late. The night was far spent, and the sound of approaching footsteps shattered the stillness of the garden. Judas, his face a mask of betrayal, emerged from the shadows, leading a band of armed men. With a kiss that felt like a searing betrayal, Judas identified Jesus. The soldiers, cold and menacing, moved to apprehend him. Jesus, his voice calm and steady, said, "Whom seek ye?" When they answered, Jesus of Nazareth, a flicker of defiance crossed his features. "I am he," he declared, his voice ringing with quiet authority. The disciples, fear flickering in their eyes, scattered into the night. Jesus, alone but resolute, stood his ground. As the soldiers seized him, he turned to Peter, who had just impulsively drawn his sword. "Put up thy sword into the sheath," Jesus commanded. "The cup which my Father hath given me, shall I not drink it?" With that, Jesus allowed himself to be led away, the fate of humanity resting upon his shoulders. The weight of the cross loomed large, yet his spirit remained unbroken. His prayer in the garden, a testament to both his humanity and his unwavering faith, had marked the beginning of the end, but also the beginning of a new hope. Scene 2. Pilate. The rooster's harsh crow shattered the pre-dawn silence, mocking the emptiness in Peter's stomach. Guilt gnawed at him, a constant reminder of his denial just hours earlier. Outside, the first rays of dawn painted the sky in vibrant hues, casting an ironic glow on the mockery Jesus had endured throughout the night. As the city awoke, Jerusalem bustled with the noise of the marketplace and the murmur of angry whispers. Jesus, bound and exhausted, was dragged before the Sanhedrin, the powerful Jewish council. The air crackled with hostility, accusations buzzing menacingly. The smell of sweat and desperation mingled with the stale scent of burning incense. Caiaphas, the high priest, presided, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of hatred and fear. "Are you the chosen one?" he boomed, his voice resonating in the vast hall. Silence stretched, broken only by Jesus' ragged breaths. "If I tell you," Jesus replied, his voice quiet yet clear, "you won't believe me. And if I ask you, you won't answer or let me go free." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the meek prisoner they expected. Jesus' words held a quiet power, a defiance that unsettled even the most hardened men present. False witnesses were brought forth, their stories contradictory and flimsy. The elders, desperate for a conviction, seized upon any accusation, no matter how outrageous. But Jesus remained silent, his gaze fixed on something unseen above the heads of the angry crowd. Finally, Caiaphas, frustrated by Jesus' composure, leaned forward and demanded, "I command you, tell us whether you are the chosen one, the Son of God." "I am Jesus," answered, his voice ringing with quiet dignity, "and I shall sit at the right hand of power and return in glory with my Father." An uproar erupted. Caiaphas ripped his garments, a theatrical display of manufactured outrage. "He has committed blasphemy," he cried, spitting the words with venom. The verdict was swift and preordained. Mockery followed. Soldiers spat upon him, blindfolded him, and slapped him, demanding a prophecy each time. The once revered teacher was now a spectacle, a punching bag for their frustration and fear. Through it all, Jesus endured. He absorbed the physical pain and the verbal abuse with a stoicism that left even his captors speechless. His silence spoke volumes, a testament to his unwavering faith and the path he had chosen. By daybreak, the verdict was sealed. Jesus, condemned by the religious authorities, would be turned over to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. The die was cast. The trial, a mockery of justice from the outset, had set the stage for the ultimate sacrifice. As Jesus was led away, a lone figure, Peter, watched from a distance, tears blurring his vision. His rooster's crow, a jarring note in the night, had become a harbinger of a future he could barely comprehend. Scene 3: Crucifixion. A guttural roar echoed through the hall, the verdict pronounced. Guilty, the word hung heavy, a death knell in the thick air. Jesus, drained and pale, stood resolute amidst the chaos. Mockery erupted. Spit flew, landing with sickening thuds. Soldiers, faces twisted with sadistic glee, slapped him hard, demanding a prophecy each time. "Who struck thee?" they jeered. Silence. Jesus absorbed the blows, his gaze fixed on a point beyond the jeering faces. Caiaphas, the high priest, his eyes gleaming with a twisted sense of victory, declared, "Take him away." Rough hands tore Jesus from the courtroom, shoving him into the throng of people hungry for a spectacle. The morning sun, once a symbol of hope, now cast a harsh light upon the scene. The path to Golgotha, the place of the skull, stretched before them, a desolate pathway etched in dust and despair. The weight of the wooden cross, crudely hewn, was placed upon his raw, bleeding back. Jeering voices rose, a cacophony of hate and bloodlust. Women wept, their faces etched with sorrow. Jesus took each agonizing step, stumbling under the weight of the wood and the burden of the world's sin. Simon of Cyrene, a reluctant bystander, was forced by the soldiers to share the burden. A flicker of recognition passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of shared humanity in the face of cruelty. As they reached Golgotha, a desolate hill overlooking the city, the soldiers ripped off his garments, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. Shame, a weapon wielded by the powerful, seemed to hang in the air. Yet Jesus stood tall, his dignity unyielding. They laid him roughly on the cold earth, stretching his arms on the rough wood of the cross. The hammering began, each blow echoing with a sickening thud. Blood welled at the wounds, staining the rough wood crimson. Agony contorted his features, but there was a quiet strength in his eyes, a flicker of unwavering resolve. Two thieves, condemned alongside him, hung on either side, their faces contorted in a mix of fear and defiance. One hurled insults at Jesus, but the other, touched by Jesus' composure, pleaded, "Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom." "Truly I say to you," Jesus replied, his voice ragged but filled with a celestial calmness, "today you shall be with me in paradise." The sun climbed higher, turning the sky a merciless blue. The jeers had turned into a dull roar as the crowd began to lose interest. Hours crawled by, each excruciating breath a testament to Jesus' endurance. The world seemed to darken. Darkness descended upon the land, an unnatural shadow that mirrored the agony on the cross. Jesus cried out, a guttural question that pierced the gloom. my God, why have you forsaken me?" A long silence followed, broken only by the moans of the wind. Then, with a final cry, "It is finished," Jesus bowed his head and yielded his spirit. A tremor shook the earth, a symbolic tearing open of the barrier between humanity and the divine. A centurion at the foot of the cross, witnessing the scene, uttered in awe, "Truly this was the Son of God." The day that began with a verdict of condemnation ended with an act of ultimate sacrifice. The sun, finally peeking through the gloom, cast a faint light on the lifeless figure on the cross. Jesus' death, a brutal end to a life of love and compassion, was only the beginning of a story that would forever change the course of history. Scene 4: Resurrection. A suffocating silence hung heavy over Jerusalem. 3 days had passed since Jesus' crucifixion, 3 days of despair and crushing grief for his disciples. Hope, once a flickering flame, seemed extinguished on Golgotha's desolate hill. Mary Magdalene, her heart a leaden weight in her chest, arrived at the tomb before dawn. The first rays of sunlight cast long shadows across the rocky landscape. Tears streamed down her face as she approached the entrance, a massive stone sealing Jesus' earthly remains. Upon reaching the tomb, Mary's heart skipped a beat as she saw the stone already rolled away. Fear and confusion gripped her, wondering what had happened. Was the body stolen? Had someone defiled this sacred place? With trembling hands, Mary entered the tomb, her eyes scanning the empty space. The linen cloths that had wrapped Jesus' body were there, but he was not. Panic surged through her as she struggled to make sense of it all. Where was Jesus? Who had taken him? In her distress, Mary turned and saw a figure standing nearby, mistaking him for the gardener in her anguish. With tears streaming down her face, she pleaded, "Sir, if thou have borne him hence, tell me where thou hast laid him, and I will take him away." Then, in a voice filled with love and familiarity, the figure spoke her name. It was the voice she knew so well, the voice of her beloved master. Overwhelmed with joy and disbelief, Mary cried out, "Rabboni," which means master. It was Jesus, alive and standing before her, triumphant over death. In that moment, Mary's grief turned to joy, her doubts transformed into unwavering faith. She had witnessed the resurrection, the ultimate victory of love over death. Rushing back to the disciples, she stammered out the unbelievable news. Peter and John, fueled by a mixture of grief and disbelief, raced towards the tomb. Reaching the site, they found the entrance open and the linen cloths neatly folded, lying empty. John, the younger and more impulsive of the two, peered inside. A wave of awe washed over him as he saw the discarded linens. This wasn't the work of grave robbers. Peter, a burly fisherman, cautiously entered the tomb. His eyes fell upon the empty burial space, his mind struggling to grasp the impossible. But the carefully folded cloth spoke volumes. A profound silence filled the air, broken only by their ragged breaths. As they stood there, bewildered and speechless, an angelic figure materialized beside them. The disciples fell to their knees, overcome with awe. "Why seek ye the living among the dead?" the angel boomed, his voice filled with an otherworldly power. "He is not here, but is risen. Remember how he spoke unto you when he was yet in Galilee," the angel continued, reminding them of Jesus' own words foretelling his resurrection. A wave of realization washed over Peter and John. Jesus' teachings, once seemingly cryptic, now held a new meaning. The empty tomb was a testament to his victory over death, a promise of eternal life he had shared with them. Leaving the tomb, a mixture of joy and disbelief coursing through them, they hurried back to share the news with the other disciples. Mary Magdalene, still consumed by grief, remained at the tomb, her sobs echoing in the morning stillness. News of the resurrection spread like wildfire through Jerusalem, igniting a spark of hope that had been extinguished just days earlier. The disciples, once filled with fear and despair, were transformed. Their faith, shaken to its core, was now stronger than ever. The empty tomb became a symbol of hope, a testament to Jesus' power over death. His words echoed through the ages, a promise of eternal life for those who believed. The crucifixion, once a symbol of defeat, became a cornerstone of a new faith, a beacon in a world shrouded in darkness.